Masanobu Fukuoka was a Japanese farmer. He called himself a do-nothing farmer, the father of permaculture in some sense. Good friends with Bill Mollison, the quote-unquote originator, or whatever he calls himself, of permaculture. Back in like the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, he wrote this book, One Straw Revolution. Masanobu did. And in that book, it begins in the first 20 or 30 pages, Fukuoka's lamentation of the conventional or commercial agricultural scene. And it's always so interesting to me because his lament of this monocrop, chemically infused, right, post-war, think about that, that's really important. We're in the post-war era of conventional agriculture, so we're seeing the rise of chemical pollutants like we've never seen before. The rise of production, right? Feeding and what happens in the Cold War, right? Like this is a pivotal moment in conventional agriculture's history in terms of a global emergence into this thought of control and colonization of the land and resources and such. And he writes, and he doesn't lament any of the things that I just said. He doesn't even bring them up in his book. And he says, the problem of modern agriculture is that the farmer doesn't have time to write poetry. Poetry is what we lack in agriculture. And he says if there's going to be a culture that arises to solve for the ills of itself plus its agricultural stepsister, we need to become poets. And I'm not saying everybody has to become a physical poet, right? I don't think that's what Fukuoka is saying either. What I think we have to start understanding is that the quietness and the peace and the ability to truly look via introspection into things, that is the role of the poet. Right? And I also think that the role of the poet is to put together novel phrases from very simple words. Read the best poem in the world. You will understand every word in that poem. Maybe one or two comes down to an old English vernacular that you're going to have to look up, like though being THO, right? Just like silly little things. But in essence, that poet even made that word though even shorter and more simple, right? And so in a sense, what a poet is doing, a very good poet, is he's taking these novel and unbelievably otherworldly concepts, and he's conveying them to you in simple little rhyming phrases, right? And so he takes the complex and he gives it to you in this simple little boat. That's the power of poetry, and I think that's what the regenerative world in 1940, when Fukuoka was writing, needs. And I think we still have time to deploy poetry to save us, right? Like right now, everybody's like, I was talking to one guy recently, and he's like, oh, blockchain is going to save the regenerative whatever. And I said, blockchain shit. Poetry is what we need. And he pretty much just hung up on me.